Hey, Liz, do you know anything about people getting removed from the meeting from recordings?
Removed from the meeting from recordings. No.
Well, when I started recording, I got a little note that came up that said, so-and-so will be removed from the meeting. And I've heard other people mention this happening when it with certain email addresses. I don't know if there's some setting.
Yeah.
You don't know about that?
I don't. I mean, the best bet is to join with your kid's email if all else fails, I think.
Okay. Well, if anybody's struggling to get in, you might just make that suggestion. You definitely can get in with an Academy Lafayette address. So I want to get started at 6:01, and I know it's right at that time when people are making those transitions at home. So I imagine people will be popping in and popping out, and that's totally fine. Oh, good. Jennifer Dye was able to get back in. Hopefully she'll be able to stay. So I'm going to jump right in, and I'd like to be able to talk for a bit and then answer any questions too. So it might be tough because I have a lot to say. One of the things you're going to find out is I'm pretty passionate about the International Baccalaureate program. And so I'm going to try to keep it brief, but just know I would love to talk your ear off if you have more questions sometime. So thank you all for joining us. I see a lot of 6th grade families joining in, and that's particularly who this is geared towards, but the information definitely has to do with all of the kids at Academy Lafayette at the Armour campus right now. So my name's Katie Wilson. I'm a 9th grade English teacher, so I'm starting at the high school, helped get the high school going, part of that team. But I'm also the IB coordinator for our middle years program and then our up-and-coming diploma program. And I've worked in an IB school since 2003. So I've been part of the organization in different ways over the course of a number of years. Primarily, I've been a high school teacher and worked in what's known as the Diploma Program. And so in, 2018, I joined with Academy Lafayette in their middle years program. So this is my first year as the coordinator. However, it's been a pretty easy transition for me. I know quite a bit about the program, and I'm really excited to be in a role where I can help students and teachers and just help better implement the program. Okay, so just to give you a brief history on the International Baccalaureate program, one of the things that I found that was particularly interesting was where it all started. It started in 1968 in Switzerland, and it originated after there was an obvious need for developing a curriculum for geographically mobile families. So these would be families who, families who had ambassadors and diplomats among their families who were traveling and moving, and were really looking. There was really a need for finding a curriculum that would span across many different countries and cultures around the world, that families could feel confident about moving their kids to and from. So that's where the whole idea of, that's where the whole foundation, that's how it started. And then part of that too was to make sure that kids were being well prepared for universities. So that's where it started. And now Academy Lafayette, oops, I missed a slide here. Oh, okay. Now Academy, this is the one I wanted to talk to. So now Academy Lafayette has over 5,000 world schools. So from 1968, the program has grown to over 5,000 world schools. So it also mentioned, it has a little breakdown here of the different, in the United States here we have, 1,800 of those. So there's still quite a few like a big piece of this is all of the other schools around the world. And I actually, sorry, I'm fumbling through my slides here. I skipped a slide thinking but I didn't mean to. So here we are in 2020, and what started the IB program was the Diploma Program, or that original program was called the Diploma Program. And now IB has spanned into 4 different programs. The ones that Academy Lafayette is currently implementing or working towards implementing are the Middle Years Program and the Diploma Program. Okay, So the middle years program does span up through 10th grade, and next year we will, of course, be extending our program up through 10th grade. So this is our first year with the 9th grade part of the program. The diploma program is the one that we're currently working on, and we're in what's called the candidacy phase. So we are in the process of getting authorized to provide that program to 11th and 12th graders. I'm not going to talk much about that this evening, but we most definitely will be talking about that program later on in the year. Okay, so now this slide makes more sense. So now we have over 5,000 world schools. And then if you look down, I've broken it, I took some data off of their website, kind of showing the United States as far as the MYP program. So our 6th through 10th year, 6th through 10th grade year program. There's 600 of those schools, over 600 in the United States. And then if you look, there's only 3 in Missouri, and we are the only NYP program in Kansas City. So that's one of the things that really does set Academy Lafayette apart, not just at the middle school, but also as we expand that into the high school. There's no other high school who's offering this program in the metro area. So what exactly is an IB education? This is what I could talk a lot about, but there's really 4 foundational components to it, 4 key components. And it has to do with international mindedness, which IB, I think, claims to have coined this idea. The IB learner profile, as well as conceptual connections between subject matters, and then these approaches to learning and teaching. And I'm just going to talk very briefly about each of these, just so you understand how what your children may be experiencing is different than other middle school and early high school programs. So international mindedness is simply just a way of thinking and being and acting that's characterized by this openness to the world and this recognition of this deep interconnectedness that we all have. So at AL, students demonstrate international mindedness through their multilingualism. So they will, that's why we expand beyond just the French immersion, but also experience the learning of a 3rd language. They experience international mindedness also through engaging lessons and curriculum that requires students to reflect on the lives of others in the U.S., but also well beyond. And that happens in the development of our yearly plans and our unit plans, but also how we work with one another within our classrooms. So these are the 10 traits. This is what's referred to as the IB learner profile, these 10 traits, and you will hear these words come up. We celebrate our students' abilities to practice and get better at these skills, but these are ultimately what helps develop the international mindedness, the international mindset. So teachers and the AL curriculum help develop these traits in our students through lessons and activities, and just simply talking about how all of these traits are inside of us, and it takes work to develop them. So for instance, I know most recently we've talked quite a bit with the 6th graders as well as the 9th graders. Madam Seeley and I were both working on this recently, and I believe she even expanded it to the 7th and 8th grades, but really talking about the necessity of being balanced in this very chaotic time that we're all living through, and really helping students come up with strategies to help them better, tackle the chaos that's out there. And but if you think about it, so much of what the kids are being asked to do as they participate in virtual learning and encounter this new way of learning, we're asking them to also be risk takers, and we're asking them to be thinkers and caring in that, we have this whole new environment. So all of these traits you can see are really easy for us to talk about with kids, because they really are essential to being a whole developed person. I'm not going to go into detail on any of these, but I wanted to at least give you an idea of when we talk about these global concepts, what we mean, or what we're referring to. So these are the broad concepts through which all of our curriculum is somehow connected. So every unit that we plan and every subject matter somehow is connected back to one of these conceptual, one of these 6 concepts. So for example, right now in my class, we're studying the spoken word poetry and short stories. And this unit is connected to the conceptual, to the concept of personal and cultural expression. So we're looking at what's being said in the United States, but then also connecting it to Africa and South America. That's primarily what we're doing in my current unit. And then approaches to teaching is also, and learning is also a key piece to this. Teachers have these 6 approaches to teaching that kind of guide how we do lessons. And then the instruction, and then the approaches to learning is how we help students respond to our teaching. Oops, I might have gone too fast. All of a sudden. Can you guys see that? I don't know, it's not showing up on my, okay. So there we are, Academy Lafayette in the middle of the United States teaching IB. This is actually from their website. I just happened to notice that we were showcased one day and I took a screenshot. So now looking at the IB program at Academy Lafayette, we currently, like I was mentioning, we are 6 through 9 with the plan to expand through 10th grade next year. And primarily, you know, the things that you will see in our classrooms are the inquiry-based learning, community-focused instruction, or like activities oftentimes. And then at the end of 10th grade, a personal project. That's kind of every NYP program has a project. And we will have the personal project in 10th grade. I also included the Diploma Program here, just so you could see, you know, kind of see what it is. It's up and coming for 11th and 12th grades, and it really is about preparing kids well for the next step of university. And then there's this opportunity for students to also be awarded college credit by performance on, you know, a set number of exams. So we're not going to talk about that today, but I at least wanted to introduce that idea to you. So you can see I posted both missions here because when you compare the 2 missions, you can see why it makes sense for AL to be a IB World School. There's a commitment to the intercultural understanding, as well as focusing on developing individuals to be active in the world around them. So it's pretty easy for teachers at Academy Lafayette to adopt the mission of IB because they're so closely connected. So now what I want to do is spend some time kind of going over how the grade book might look different from what you're used to from the grade school, and help you kind of navigate also this unusual situation where we are trying to build, develop these students in this IB World School while also being online. So there, it may not look exactly like it has in the past if you've had students before. However, the key pieces are, the foundation is still there. So I do want to go over the grading system and what makes our system unique. So we're at this interesting juncture now with our grade book due to the virtual learning status. So teachers are having to make changes to the way they've taught before and the way they assess students, but no doubt it's happening. And in years prior, there might have been more projects or more certain kinds of assessments, but nonetheless, there's some key things that are still happening. And that what's really important, and I know kids are learning this right now because I've been hearing it in the classrooms, is learning about the difference between formative and summative assessment. And formative assessment really is about helping the student understand where they are and get practice at skills. So with our formative assessments, kids may be getting scores, they'll be getting feedback from their teachers, but these are not the scores that are going to have the standing impact on their overall grade. The summative assessment is more a summary of what a student can do. So formative assessments are for practice and learning. Summative assessments are for summarizing achievement of skills practiced. So there are many more formative assessments than there are summative. However, the summative scores are the ones that help teachers determine an overall learning, overall level of achievement in a class. So, so although these scores are just about progress, the formative ones, they give you a great deal of information about how you're doing and how your child is doing if you're the parent. So that's why the progress reports, we have progress reports coming out this week, and that is one of the reasons why they're so important. Although they aren't permanent marks on a grade card, they're really giving you a window into how things are going virtually. Because I know as a parent at Academy Lafayette, I don't always know, what's happening is not always what I think is happening. As I've received emails that have helped me, help my children make some adjustments. So one thing that I love about an NYP program is that an NYP school uses trend-based grading. And I love this system in comparison to a traditional grading system where students are penalized for not knowing how to do something in the beginning of a school year. Instead, with trend-based grading, a teacher is looking at where a student is at that point in time. So I'll show you some examples in a few slides, but ultimately, like most US schools take an average of a student's grade. At an NYP, we're looking at how a student is trending in a certain set of skill at whatever point in time they're being assessed. And then the overall grade is not determined until that student has had the whole year to practice those skills and then, provide a summary of their achievement. So even in a normal school, this time of year, even in a normal school year, at this point in time, there would not be a great deal of summative assessments for a teacher to be referring to determine a score. This is especially in the first trimester. So it is common that only 1 or 2 criterion may have been scored, but even more so this year, there may be even fewer scores this year. That doesn't mean there isn't work happening. It just means it might look a little bit different in the grade book. So don't be shocked when you get your progress report and in a certain class and you don't see any scores. There will be for the trimester, most definitely. So, however, I will say a 0 anywhere on the report card, on any course, and any criterion is an important indicator that that something is not going well in regards to assessment. Most likely what it means is that your child is missing work and that not enough work has been turned in that a score can be determined at this point. So teachers are leaving individualized comments for every student. And I've been telling my own students that my comments to them are probably what's most important right now. So that's something to be looking forward to when you get your progress report tomorrow. It's tomorrow, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying, Katie, that if nothing is there next to the criteria, that means that area has not been assessed.
Correct.
But if you see a 0, it's an indication that the teacher hasn't received enough work to really make an assessment at that point from the child.
Correct. Thank you for making sure that was clear. Yes, and I hope that you do see scores in a number of classes, but but even if you don't see any scores, that feedback can tell you quite a bit about how things are going. So I know this slide is kind of hard to see, but ultimately what I wanted you to see here is that every course we offer has 4 different criterion. So that top course, I believe says, I don't know, I can hardly read it myself, language and literature, that is the English class, and you can see that it has 4 criterion. Each of these courses listed there in the left-hand column is one of the courses that your student is in. And the names might look different on the report card, but nonetheless, each of them has a different set of criterion. So of course they're related to different skills that relate to the subject matter, but this is kind of a glimpse into what all is being assessed throughout the entire year. So what I have here is, and this is what you'll see on your progress report, this gives you an idea of the scores that you do receive. This is what those scores might mean at this point. Actually, they would mean the same thing at the end of the school year. But ultimately, the 7 or 8, I try to stress with kids more than anything at the beginning of the year, you should not be expecting yourself to be reaching this. This is about exceeding the expectation. The 1 and 2 area, and maybe even that 3, is an area of concern in that it if it was to continue. I think right now it may not be as unusual, or especially the 3, as students are learning about teacher expectations and learning about how to be in middle school overall anyway, as a whole. So ultimately, I think the big, what I would be looking for is the 0, the 1, 2 levels, and finding out what you can do to help your student, achieve higher as we move forward. So for each of the 4 criteria determined for each subject, students will eventually receive a score in each of those criteria. And it gets a little complicated, especially without a grade book in front of us. But I'm going to try to explain it in just a few minutes and then try to answer some questions here. So one thing going back to this that I want to point out is each of the 4 criterion, a student will be given a score between 0 and 8 by the end of the year. So this is looking at the end of the year. This is an example grade report at the end of the year in an English class. So those are the 4 criterion that you get assessed on in English. So this student, I have to go really close here. You can see that this student received a 6, a 7, a 4, and a 5 in each of those 4 criterion. So those numbers are then all added up at the end of the year to determine the final score in English. So we see 22 out of, is that right? 22 out of 32, might seem like a less than stellar grade. However, what this is telling you on the MYP scale, this student actually has a B. And the way that works, in this next slide, let me see if I can explain it to you. So, so the trended scores at each criteria at the end of the year are added together, and then they're converted to an OLA that is then put on a scale of up to 7 points. And I believe that's why 7 for the end of the year grade. I think it happens to be because that's what they use in the diploma program. That's really the only reason why I think they use a 7-point scale. But that 7-point scale also communicates varying levels of achievement, like a traditional grading scale does. But there's just it gives you a little. I mean, I guess it gives a little bit more freedom to. I don't want to say freedom. Here, let me show it to you. Let me see if this helps. So looking at, you can see how those 32 points then are broken down over the 7-point scale. So if you're in that range between 19 and 23 points total, you're in this 5 range, which is above average score. Okay, so when we look at how the MYP grade report might compare to a traditional school's grades, like a traditional middle school grades, I created this document to help you see where you might, where a student might fall. You can see that to receive a B is a range between 17 out of 23 points. This is something that we'll be sharing much later when we're looking at the end of course or the end of term grades. But ultimately, what you need to know is right now, this is what we're heading towards. Right now, a student can't, we're not going to have an overall letter grade type of score because there just isn't going to be enough work. But what you can see in the progress report is how a student is building towards how they are on this 8-point scale that then eventually leads to this end of the course scale. And I know this is complicated and really you need to have a set of grades to really help you see how it plays out. But I want to go back to this slide here. So in every course that your student has, you will see a set of scores for each criterion, and you'll be able to compare how their total points then transfers or converts to the 7-point scale. So that's a lot of information, and probably more information than you'll need right now. But I wanted to get that in your head because I know it's a big change from the elementary schools. I also want to be able to try to answer some questions for people who are new to the NYP program. So if you have any, we have a couple minutes here before the next session is going to start.
Hi, Katie. This is Steigman's mom, Tamara. I'm just curious if all of this great information will be on the report card for folks who forget or weren't here?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, you won't see all of this on their progress report. Most definitely, you will see it with your report card. And we're working on putting a document together for the website so that you can refer to it whenever you need to.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? Any other questions about the progress report that will be coming out tomorrow?
I have a, Katie?
Hey, yes.
I have another question. Do high school use the same system as middle school?
Yes, we will be using the same system as the middle school, so up through 10th grade.
Okay.
Most definitely, yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Angela French, Isaac French's mom. I just have a question. Like typically in the past, before there was a high school, there was the 8th grade IB project. Is that no longer? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that is correct. So now that we're extending the program up through 10th grade, we now will be doing the personal project at the end of 10th grade.
Okay, thank you.
And it's a different project than the ones that you do at the lower levels.
Okay, so 8th grade will still do some type of project then?
They will not be doing that this year, no.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Hi, I have a 6th grader, and I have 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is, I assume from the grade chart that colleges know how to look at the scores and evaluate them against other letter systems.
Yes.
And the other question I have is about comparison with programs that do AP classes, and if there's any opportunity to take those classes, if there's any overlap with the curriculum where they could take a class even if it's not an official AP class.
You know, I will say that having taught both, there's a lot of similarities between the classes, between the types of courses that you're talking about, but that's for the 11th and 12th grade. So I'll be addressing all of those kinds of questions. I'd be happy to address it with you one-on-one, but I know we are about to end this meeting. Overall, I will say it's different from the AP, but very similar. But I can also tell you we will not be offering AP classes. However, IB, the high school IB exams are recognized at more and more universities every year. But I am, having worked in a diploma program for a number of years, I had, many students do well on those exams and get college credit in the same way that advanced placement students do. And I do think there's quite a few advantages to the International Baccalaureate set of exams over the AP ones.
So I might have time for one more question, maybe.
Sure, one more question.
What type of subject do they study, actually? I mean, so there's math, science, and
all of them.
Okay.
Yeah. So all courses will be at varying levels, but it will be all IB courses.
So it's basically from the 6th grade to the 10th grade to continuation.
Yes, 6 through 10, and then when we have the diploma program, it will go 11 through 12. Also.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay, I'll take one more question. We okay, Liz? And we okay? One more question. Okay.
I think I remember hearing this in the high school meeting, but at some point, do they get to choose? Are all students graded by this, or isn't there a point where they get to choose whether they want to go on a certain more advanced track? And
this is the advanced track. As far if you're talking about the high school, for the high school.
Right. So do students get to choose?
They'll get to choose courses, But as far as whether or not, so there, one thing maybe this is what you're thinking of. There's the diploma program where all kids do all of the classes. You can also be in an IB World school and only do some of the IB courses take the IB exams. That may be what you're thinking of from a previous conversation. So there's what's called an IB diploma where you can do all of the courses, and then there's also what's called IB certificates where you can pick and choose which classes you want to take for the exam sessions.
And that's only in high school.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So everybody's in the middle years program until at the end of 10th grade. Then you're choosing, do you want to be a full diploma candidate where you're taking all IB classes, or are you going to be, you know, having sort of a combo and not getting that full diploma?
And it's not like a high school diploma. It's like it's the International Baccalaureate diploma. It has its own kind of set of tests that you take in order to get the diploma. What often happens is students will pick one or two classes, and then they may only take one or two classes to sit for exams, is what they call it.
How do you get in? Do you have to test into the?
No. The whole idea of having this NYP program is to help prepare all of our students for the opportunity to be a part of the diploma program to its fullest, if that's what they choose.
Okay.
I can tell we need to have another meeting soon so that people, so I can better explain. I know I rushed through that diploma part, but mainly because I wanted to make sure we had time for all of the other, which is about 6th grade and grade cards and such. So any other questions, you can email me at kwilson, excuse me, at academylafayette.org. And I'd be happy to speak with you further.
Great.
Okay.
And we're going to organize like a high school information session for those of you that are considering your high school options, and let you know when that's going to be, right, Katie?
Yeah, most definitely. Okay, I'm going to stop presenting now. And Liz, are you taking over this meeting, or are you starting a new one? I couldn't remember what you.
We're going to stay on here. And Adam is going to present. Hi, everybody. My name's Liz Seeley. I'm the school counselor of the Armour campus, so the middle school and our new high school.
And hi, everyone. I'm Adam Nahum, the school social worker at Oak. I will go ahead and get to presenting this.
So I know there were 2 sessions. You just finished up the session about IB grading and the IB program, and now we're moving into suicide awareness and prevention, and that'll go till 7:15. So, you know, we may have more people join. We may have some people leave, and just do what works for you.
In the middle of the.
Shall we give it a minute just to make sure that everyone who intends to be here is here? Or should we just start going?
Let's go.
Let's do this. All right. Well, welcome, everyone. Liz and I are co-leading this thing, and our superhero selves are up on the screen for a little fun. We're wanting to start just with kind of getting centered and getting our intentions going, because as we talked about this, being a parent requires so much grace and just kind of like being kind to ourselves sometimes when we're going through certain struggles. And we're talking about something today that has to do with, you know, major struggles and obstacles that quite a lot of families go through at some point. And so just that concept of being graceful and kind to ourselves came up as we were chatting. This is a reading that I thought might center us. I'm going to go ahead and get going to the Counseling and Social Services website. On the Parent Guardian Tools section under Readings is where you'll find a copy of what I'm about to read if you'd like to see a copy sometime. So, oh, but of course. Okay, hold on one moment, everyone. I'm so sorry about that. Here we go. I guess my URL doesn't work anymore. Well, this one does. So this speech, if you've never heard it before, is called Welcome to Holland. I'm going to go ahead and just read it out loud. And it speaks to, it's written by a parent who had a child in special education, a special needs child. But, you know, we definitely feel that this applies to what families go through when they have a child with any mental health struggles. So I am often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability, to try to help people who have not shared that unique experience to understand it, to imagine how it would feel. It's like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make your wonderful plans, the Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands and the stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." "Holland?" you say. "What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've dreamed of going to Italy." But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a new group of people you would never have met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy, but after you've been there for a while, you catch your breath, you look around, and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills, Holland has tulips, Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about how wonderful a time they had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, "Yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned." And the pain of that will never, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is very, very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to go to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special, very lovely things about Holland. So I don't know if that resonated with anyone, but that was something we wanted to share to start ourselves off, because kind of talking about suicide often involves accepting wherever we're at and accepting wherever our child is at. And that can be very, very hard to do. So today's plan is to discuss some common misconceptions about suicide, to identify warning signs and risk factors, and how to respond to suicidal behaviors. And last but not least, how professional help will look, what that would look like if you got professional help. Okay. We're starting off with a little bit of true or false questions, okay? Those who talk about suicide are all talk and are just looking for attention. So take a moment, especially if you're with someone, say what you think. You know, is it true? Is it false? False. Most suicidal individuals do give some warning signs that they are in emotional pain and are thinking of hurting themselves. Even if they're seeking connection, not just attention, but connection, they're doing so because they're in need of help, and we can help them.
Yeah, a lot of times we try to help teachers rephrase, this kid just wants attention. Well, this kid just wants connection. And when you change that one word, it's really powerful.
Yeah. If we talk about suicide, we may give students the idea to kill themselves. Is that true or false?
False.
And the thing is that this is actually a very common myth. I'm sure some of you were thinking maybe is true, or some people do. Research does show that talking about suicide effectively lessens a young person or any person's anxiety. It doesn't put ideas in their head, because the reality is, I like to think of it kind of like first aid. Like if nobody knew how to give first aid or CPR, and I never said to you like, "Hey, are you allergic to that? Are you okay? Can you breathe right now?" I might not be able to save someone's life as easily. So if we never talk about things that are life-saving, then we're not able to solve that problem and hopefully save someone's life. And it's that serious. So I'm going to go ahead and play our video.
I have my ups and downs, just like anybody else.
Maybe more than anybody else.
I can be hard to figure out.
And I like my privacy. I don't want you looking over my shoulder all the time.
But you know your kid better than anybody else. And if you think he's acting different than usual,
Acting really down, crying all the time for no good reason.
or getting really mad, not able to sleep, or sleeping too much,
Shutting her friends out or giving her stuff away.
acting reckless, drinking, using drugs, staying out late,
Suddenly not doing stuff he used to love.
or doing stuff that's just not like him.
It might be nothing to worry about. It might just be high school.
Or it might be something more. He might be depressed. Not just feeling down, really depressed.
It might be that your kid is thinking about killing himself. It happens. More than you think. More than it should.
And people say, I had no idea.
I thought it was just a phase he was going through.
I never thought she'd do it.
I wish he'd come to me.
I wish he'd said
I
something.
wish I'd said something.
When it's too late. So if you think your kid's acting different, if she seems like a different person, say something.
Say, what's wrong? How can I help?
And ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, it helps.
When people are thinking about killing themselves, they want somebody to ask. They want somebody to care.
Maybe you're afraid you'll make it worse if you ask. Like, you'll put the idea in their head.
Believe me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, the best way to keep a teenager from killing herself is to ask. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
And what if they say yes?
Or maybe.
Or sometimes,
Well, here's what you don't say.
that's crazy.
Don't be such a drama
You're
queen.
making too much of this.
That boy's not worth killing yourself over. That's not going to solve anything.
You're just trying to get attention.
You're not going to kill yourself. What you do say is,
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. How can I help? We'll get through this together.
Let's keep you safe.
a lot of people think about killing themselves, adults and kids. Most of them never try it, but some of them do. So if your kid says,
I'd be better off dead. I can't live with this.
I'm gonna kill myself, take her seriously. Find someone she can talk to about it. Someone who knows how to help.
Sometimes kids want to kill themselves because something happened. A breakup, a failure. But sometimes it goes deeper, and it's not going to go away by itself. Get some help. Talk to your doctor.
Or a counselor at school.
Or your minister.
But don't just let it drop.
And make sure that your kid always has someone to turn to. Someone he trusts. Make a list together, right then. 3, 4, 5 names.
Put a suicide hotline number on there too.
Have him keep that list in his wallet, so he always knows where to turn.
Make sure your home is safe. If you have pills she could use to hurt herself, lock them up.
If you have a gun, don't just lock it up. Get it out of the house. The bullets too.
And one more thing. If you think your kid might be about to hurt himself, don't leave him alone.
Take him to the emergency room.
Call 911 if you have to.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask. Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure. Trust your gut, because it never hurts to ask.
And it can make a big difference. All the difference. In your kid's life.
Hey,
My
Liz.
Well, I was saying something profound now. Okay. I was saying that the kids in that video did a good job of describing the risk factors. There's no one single risk factor or predictor of youth suicide. It's like a perfect storm, or as like you're driving down the road and all the lights are green. So you're having multiple risk factors kind of coming together at once. And so some of those could be a recent loss, the death of a loved one, a divorce, like a change in family dynamic. A breakup is probably for teens the number one of the most important risk factors to pay attention to. Alcohol and substance abuse, obviously a risk factor is if a kid can get access to means. Firearms are the number one way that kids die by suicide, so it's important to keep those locked up. Depression or comorbidities. So depression and a mood disorder like depression is a big risk factor. And then if you combine that with other disorders like bipolar disorder, puts you at greater risk. Any previous suicidal behavior, so kids that have attempted have a much higher likelihood of attempting again, and a history of trauma. If the student behaves or speaks in a way that indicates they're feeling hopeless about the future, or they're isolating, that's a risk factor. Impulsivity, so that kind of goes back to alcohol and drug use, aggressive behavior, getting in trouble at school, or and just not thinking before. I mean, most kids don't think before they act. They're still developing their prefrontal cortex. But if you see that they have much higher risk-taking and impulsive behaviors than their peers, you'd want to pay attention to that. A history of non-suicidal self-injury. So we think of that's like cutting or burning the skin. Like non-suicidal self-injury could be scratching and less intensive types of self-harm. But when we're talking about like actual cutting with a knife or things like that, that doesn't necessarily mean a student or kid is suicidal, but what it's doing there is it's lowering their inhibitions and getting them more comfortable with those behaviors that could eventually relate to suicide. So students that have been bullied or students who do bully, and then students who are struggling with gender identity or sexual orientation if they're in an unsupportive environment. Those are some of the major risk factors we see with kids and teenagers. And so probably while I was talking, you're like thinking, oh, does my kid have any of these risk factors? And kind of looking through that lens and focusing on those negative things, but it's equally as important to focus on the protective factors, because these factors that we're going to go over right now play a major role in protecting your kid against suicide. So think, does your kid have strong social connections with adults, at home, adults at school, with friends? Are they cognitively flexible? Like, are they able to solve problems? Solve conflicts without violence? Are they resilient? Can they bounce back with your support from a setback? Another protective factor is the family's willingness to get treatment. It's probably one of the most important ones when it comes to getting mental health treatment. Strong spiritual or religious ties tends to be a protective factor because it usually is very tied up with the concept of hope and a greater purpose in life, which helps protect kids against acting on suicidal thoughts. Kids that practicing coping strategies, and that can even be like playing soccer. It doesn't have to necessarily be deep breathing and meditation. Just the things that make them happy and lose track of time and make them feel like their best selves, and also have strategies to calm themselves down when they get very upset. And then another great protective factor is considering your household and looking at it through the lens of making it safe for your kid, and locking up pills and firearms.
I was about to start talking without unmuting myself. Okay, so warning signs. I'm going to start with just suicidal notes, texts, social media posts. These can come in many different shapes and sizes. And if we have any parents with younger children here, I do sometimes see people bring me drawings that aren't necessarily obviously suicidal, but you might be concerned about them. And so drawings is another thing I would add, where we're just trying to understand that that's a communication, trying to understand what it is saying. It can be a warning sign. Threats, so they can be direct threats where a person can say, I want to die, I'm going to kill myself. Indirect would be, no one will miss me, the world will be better off without me, there's no point in living, things like that. Depression, hopelessness, those are warning signs, especially if you're seeing a loss of energy, lack of enthusiasm for life, risk-taking behaviors such as drinking and driving, gunplay, alcohol, and substance abuse. Again, when it comes to depression and hopelessness, though, also isolation is important. But sometimes if you've seen that a kiddo has been depressed a lot and then suddenly they're very happy, Again, mood changes is just very important to keep an eye out for, because those kinds of changes in mood can just indicate that something's going on. So plan, method, access. Do they have a plan? Meaning, not only do they have an idea of, well, I want to find a gun, right? But also a plan can include, I'm going to do that today, or I might do that a week from now. And those, as you can tell, are very different level of seriousness to those plans and risk to those plans. The method is also depends on seriousness. So children will talk about methods that are not as deadly, and firearms, as we've mentioned, pills. There are various things that are much more deadly. And then access. Again, the locking up of those things or removal of those things can be very helpful as well. Giving away prized possessions or making final arrangements. And this can be subtle, where we try to train our students too about this kind of stuff, you know, just paying attention to those major changes. There we go. So intense feelings of being a burden, particularly as kiddos try to seek treatment, sometimes they can feel like they're a burden to their family. And it's so important to kind of change that thinking. Isolation and lack of belonging, lack of social connections, as Liz was talking about earlier. Sudden changes in behavior. So changes in eating patterns, they're not eating as much, or they're not finding pleasure in eating, they're not enjoying sleeping, or it's hard to fall asleep, they're losing a lot of sleep, or they're sleeping tons, and then that can be a concern as well.
Yeah, it could be indicative of depression, not necessarily suicidal thoughts, but that's another, you know, situation you'd want to seek professional help to address.
Right, right. You know, death and suicidal themes in writing, reading, and websites, which can not be a warning sign. It's, again, just kind of creating a picture. Just like Liz was saying, if you see green lights, go, 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 things are stacking up like dominoes, then we're getting a bigger picture. But sometimes children are fascinated by that without it having to do with suicide. Elementary school age children may also make impulsive threats, like running into traffic or jumping from high places, or scratching or cutting, or banging their head on a wall. And these are, again, just things to watch out for as warning signs, especially with younger children. They're often just trying to communicate how they feel, and it's so important to start talking about this topic if they start talking about it. Again, that openness is important. Okay, how to respond. So most important is to not be judgmental with body, tone, and words. This is where I know as parents, none of us would want to think that we have judgment in our body language, our tone, or words. But something that can be helpful to do is to just do journaling or a conversation with an adult where you talk about like biases and opinions that we have about suicide. Because it might come out just in our body language, you know, arms crossed, or, you know, the tone of our voice, where if we might sound frustrated or worried, that it's just, it can be very helpful to try to work on those feelings before we respond. Not, you know, easy to say, hard to do. But
you might have to go into the bathroom and collect yourself emotionally, because the amount of stress you'll be under in that moment, if you have a kid, your kiddo telling you that, you might have to have the other parent watch the kid for a second so you can kind of take some deep breaths, because it's really hard to respond when you are so emotional yourself.
And there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know exactly what to say at this moment. You know, like, give me a second here. This is such a serious topic. I want to take a moment to kind of get my bearings. You know, do not be afraid to talk, again, openly about suicide. Begin and maintain a chain of supervision. As a clinical therapist, this would happen a lot, where like parents would have to make sure to communicate, you know, hey, I'm going to go do the groceries. You know, we're still on our safety plan. You know, go ahead and sit with Jane. You know, Jane's going to go to the bathroom soon. And when she goes to the bathroom, this is part of our safety plan. So just very open, oops, sorry guys. Very open communication about that. Where did I go? What happened here? Okay. All right. So, Removing means that they mention when talking about their suicidal thoughts, which is really important, you know, especially trying to understand, have they thought about how they would, what's part of their plan, how they would end their life? Because, you know, just making sure that that specific means is the first thing you remove is shown to be the most effective. Because often when people are thinking like that about suicidal thoughts, it's a little bit more blinders on. And so they often only have one go-to plan at the moment. So, you know, taking your child to the ER or a crisis walk-in or calling an ambulance if needed. And I will say that it can be scary, the idea of calling an ambulance. It's always a good idea to maybe talk it through with your child to explain what the experience is going to be like the best you can. And know that if you're worried about the kiddo being unsafe in the car with you, it's okay to call an ambulance. There's no problem with that. The hospital system will not have a problem. It's better that if you're concerned about their safety in the car, that they're in an ambulance, because that's going to be a safer scenario. So we now have another video just to talk about the how to respond question a little further. It's a video about empathy.
And I think you can use this as you're watching this video, kind of think, not just how you, this relates not just to how you would respond if your kid was making immediate high risk threats with a plan, but even if your kid just comes to you or you're noticing those changes in mood and you're talking to your kid and they're revealing some uncomfortable, you know, some uncomfortable thoughts. So you can use this in no matter how severe the situation is.
That's a great point. So true. Okay.
So what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So I really like when the bear says, you know, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because none of us have the perfect words when our kids are struggling, because when they're struggling, we're struggling too. And there's no such thing as the perfect word. So when you're talking to your child, you want to make sure you're communicating that you love them, that you want to be there for them no matter what, that you will do whatever it takes to help them get to a place where they are happier and feel like living again. And when you're empathizing, you're going to say, it sounds like you've given up. It sounds like you feel like there's no way out. Repeating back their feelings to them, as dark as those feelings may be, validates those feelings. And it helps them understand that you truly get what they're going through, or at least you're trying to get what they're going through. Better than saying, well, you don't even have problems yet. You're just in middle school. Wait till you're an adult. And I know that's like a response that sometimes is a knee-jerk response, but these kids only see it out of their own two eyes, and they're only living in their own world. And depression is a hole that some of us have been down, and it's really hard we can't minimize that experience.
And if I can just add to, one of the common things that I hear from parents and friends is just like, well, but if I haven't gone through that thing, if I haven't been suicidal myself, how can I help my child, or how can I help my friend? I think one of the things to just remember is sometimes it's an act of imagination. Empathy is this act of imagination. So we've all at some point been through something dark, something, that hole. It might have been different for each of us, but we've been through something to where we can just dig down and say, what did that do to me? How did my life feel different? What was I going through? And then it's just, part of it is just understanding. So I just wanted to mention that because I know that's a common feeling.
Let me go to the next slide for me, Adam. I think it's just some more like examples of things you could say. But again, there's nothing perfect and there's nothing to memorize. But letting your child know you're not alone. I love you no matter what. And we're going to figure out how to get help. And I might not know what to do right now, but we're going to stay together and we're going to figure it out together. And you can also, as you're talking to them, try to understand what is the most immediate thing causing them pain? Because it could be, a mental health disorder where the pain is, you can't really put your finger on where it's coming from, but sometimes it could be a situation at school, like a problem with friends, or that's causing them this really acute pain. And if you can figure out what that is, and it is, then you can work with your mental health professional, or with me or Adam or Sheila at the Cherry campus to try to alleviate that most immediate pain. So because then, it's like a great first step to getting the kid back on feeling more in control.
Okay, I thought for a second that I skipped the slide. So we wanted to include in this presentation crisis walk-ins and, even just the 24/7 options in the area. So, SWOPE, Rediscover, and Truman Behavioral Health are the three major, big systems. And we definitely recommend using them and knowing that you can do a walk-in and just be ready for it maybe to take some time. My experience has been that the walk-ins can take a little longer. You might be waiting for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then often those appointments can take an hour, 2, depending on the agency. So it can be a big whole morning affair. But that's just something to know, is that right now these walk-ins are still available. And for 24/7 care, Children's Mercy or any ER, one of the nice things about Children's Mercy is they pay very close attention to the status of the different psych hospitals in the area. I know they're very careful to watch how the other hospitals are doing with being trauma informed and taking good care of children. So they're a great option. So a little bit about me. I used to work in a psychiatric hospital for children. It's actually one of the most difficult ones to work in because I worked over at KVC, and at that time they were a no reject hospital. So any child in the tri-state area could get sent there, especially if other hospitals wouldn't be willing to take them. So I can kind of explain a little bit about how that looks. What happens is different when you get to the ER versus when the child gets transferred to a psychiatric hospital. There is an intake process at the ER, and we'll describe that a little bit more in depth. A big part of it is, again, preparing kids and families for what the ambulance ride is like, and what that intake process is like. There's a lot of questions, unfortunately, that might get asked 2 or 3 times. And so just bring, if there's any way to have a go bag where you're bringing, you know, snacks or coloring pages or anything that just helps the kid kind of just get through all those questions and meeting people. But just know that often those professionals are very good at being people. At least that's how they're supposed to be. And so they will then set you up in an ER with a bed, they call it, in a psychiatric hospital for your child. And then the intake at the psychiatric hospital goes a little bit more in depth. And depending on the time of the day, because, you know, it can happen at night, it can 24/7, it just might look slightly differently. But basically, one of the things I recommend is trying your best to have, you know, insurance card, any like medications, just kind of like, you know, background, if you happen to have background files or anything from your child's medical history, anything that might just help answer those questions and kind of set things up, set the team up there. You know, what we wanted to make sure you all understood is that that's like the most extreme case that a child goes to a psychiatric hospital. It doesn't happen every time. And so we wanted to kind of describe how all that works, that decision-making process. There is a Columbia screening that is often used. This is one of the more popular ones. I'm not going to go through this word for word, but what I just want you to understand is that there are two keywords that the insurance companies and the providers, the medical providers, are going to be looking at. One of them is medical necessity, which is a bit of a four-letter word sometimes in the community. Because basically what it means is it a medical necessity that this child is locked in a psychiatric facility under constant supervision, under that level of care? And it doesn't mean that there's no other options, which I'll get into in a little bit, but that's the highest level of care. Psychiatric hospital, it does not get higher than that. And so they want to know, is it a medical necessity for that level of care? Is there, and then the other keywords are like, is there an active plan and means risks? So when I say active plan, remember how I was talking earlier about like when the child is thinking about killing themselves? So if a child is answering the questions at the hospital honestly, and they're saying, you know, I have thought about suicide, but I'm not thinking about doing it today. I don't even know when I would do it. It just comes into my mind. That usually would not meet a super high risk situation unless other risk factors played in, okay? Again, it's not one size fits all or one answer. It's not so simple. But then, you know, they're combining that with the means and the risks. You know, does the child, is the child part of a hunting family where there's often, you know, firearm access, and the child's been thinking about using a firearm, and the whole family's going on a, you know, hunting trip this weekend? It just, you know, combinations of factors, right? And so this document, we just wanted to share it with you because, as you can see, there's actually color coding if the child answers yes, or, and then it goes down the list through different questions about, did they make statements? Have they been having thoughts? And then as we go on to numbers 4 through 6, what is their intention? Do they intend to act out those thoughts? And again, we sometimes use the phrase like suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts are different than suicidal intent. Sometimes people think the thought without having the intention to do anything about that thought. And then do they have a specific plan? Just like I was saying, how specific is their plan? Is it time sensitive? You know, do they have a history, right, of doing something about these thoughts? And again, these are all factors that they're going to look into.
And that Columbia is what school counselors use as well to try when we have a student who makes who we have reason to believe is having suicidal thoughts or showing suicidal behaviors. We would use that to assess the level of risk. Is it low risk? Is it more just like a fleeting thought? Is it medium risk? Does the kid actually think they might follow through? Or is it high risk with a specific plan? And we'll share the slides with you, but like, you know, you're not going to pull out your Columbia and sit down with your kid, but you can use those questions as a guide, because as we've talked about, it never hurts to ask the questions. And asking about plans helps you understand the severity of what the kiddo is going through. Or she's okay. There you go.
You reminded me. No, I wanted to make sure that the permission.
And then they can have the crisis walk-in info. You guys can save it in case you ever need it.
Hey everyone, before you leave, what I'll do is I'm going to put the link in the chat right now. So if you wanted to check the chat and click on the link and just save this Google document, or rather slides, and that kind of skipped me forward. There we go. Liz, do you want to talk about the safety plan?
Sure. So whenever a student indicates they're having suicidal thoughts, we always create a safety plan with them. And the safety plan, and this is something you can do. I mean, this plan doesn't just have to be for high-risk suicidal situations. A safety plan is kind of like a plan for what to do when I'm in an emotional crisis, right? And we've all been in an emotional crisis before. What are my warning signs? What are my triggers? Like what things happen that usually push me over the edge, or what body sensations do I have that tell me I'm moving toward losing control? What are my go-to coping strategies? Is it hanging out with my dog? Is it putting on my favorite movie? Is it listening to music? Is it calling my best friend? Who are the people in your life that can offer you support? So again, going back to all those protective factors. Who are my trusted adults at home, at school, in my community who I can go to for help? And then it also includes like the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and the texting line, and you know, plans out a little bit about just if the kid is high risk and actually has a plan, how we would remove those means, and if they're high risk, how we would make sure they were supervised. And so Adam and I have created safety plans with many children before, and we always share that information with the parent, the student, and if the student, when we're referring the student for outside mental health, we share that safety plan with the parent's permission as well. So it's a document that's best that all supervising and trusted adults share, so that everyone can be on the same page about the best way to help that kid, because the kid is the one who's generated these responses. And so it's like the expert's guide to knowing what that kid needs if they enter into another suicidal episode of suicidal thoughts or just a really dark period.
And these plans can even go more in depth into like how you guys are going to check in. You know, again, it's not a black and white situation where it's like they're either at point A of not suicidal and point B suicidal, right? There's gray area in between. And so we try our best as mental health professionals to kind of just anticipate what are those different areas on the spectrum. You know, so for example, just having a system to communicate feelings and to communicate how those feelings and intentions are increasing. That's another great way to kind of kick the safety plan into gear. So that's where we really try to work on that with families.
Yeah, and for younger kids, you probably have some visuals on there. Okay, so we're here to help. So please, this is our contact info. If you are concerned about your kiddo at all, I know right now you're running the show at home and you're parenting and you're teaching and you're working and you're you know, managing their feelings and their everything. So we're happy to help. Please reach out if you need anything at all. We can give, as counselors and social workers, we do brief counseling. So that means more like, you know, for me, it's like maybe 6 sessions. It's not going to go as in depth as you would if you were in a clinical setting, like with a counselor, like your own personal therapist or psychiatrist or psychologist, but it can be really helpful for kids, and it's a great place to start. And we also offer referrals. Like we have lists of counselors outside of school that we're happy to share.
And we just highly recommend using that, not necessarily because there's something bad about a child going to therapy for a year or two or whatever. It's more like our philosophy is if we're going through their school years together and they're making transitions to new teachers, or they go to middle school and they have a new counselor, having that therapist is a great kind of tool where they might not even go to that person every week for multiple years. But if they go through a rough year and then they don't feel that they need the therapy, and then they have another hard year in middle school or high school, they've built that relationship. There's no starting the whole thing over. It's great to have that kind of tool in their toolbox. So
yeah. And we're happy to connect with outside therapists and help at school, help implement strategies at school. So in the next week or two in middle school and high school, I'm going to be doing lessons on suicide. I know Adam has already done his at Oak. We'll be sharing information about mental health and well-being, recognitions of signs that a student is at risk for suicide or their friends are. And then really talking a lot about not promising to keep it a secret if their friend was sharing with them suicidal thoughts, or if they see it on the text chain or in social media, knowing that they need to be a lifesaver and they need to share that information with a trusted adult. So we'll talk a lot about that with the kids as well when we do our lessons coming up. And I sent an email today where you can see what day each grade is having their lesson, in case you want to prime your kiddo by talking about it beforehand or debrief with them after. Because one thing that's rough about virtual teaching is you see their faces in a little box, but it's harder to read their body language and how they'll be affected. So it's great for you to know that. Does anybody have any questions? I know we are out of time now, so we will not be sad if you leave, but if anyone wants to ask any questions, we will stay on for a little bit.
I was just going to add, this is Missy Bailey. I worked at Children's Mercy and did inpatient, and I did lots of one-on-ones. And I was just going to say, you know, Adam mentioned how great it is to prep kids for an ambulance ride, but also it's so important to communicate to your kid that every single healthcare professional is there and on your guys' side to help your kiddo. Nobody is against you. Everybody is for you and wants to help you to get the resources to so that you can have your happy and fulfilled life. And so when parents sometimes, you know, might hear like pack some snacks or whatever, but you know, it's really not best to pack a bag. You're not going to get to keep your personal belongings. You need to probably say, hey, don't take your favorite sweatshirt, you know? And so it's good to communicate to your kiddo. If you need that resource, just, hey, you know what? When we go there, we're just going to keep an open mind and we're just going to know that everybody's on our side. So I just wanted to put in those 2 cents because it's often really shocking to kids when we have to take away their hoodie because they have a string on it, and that's a suicide that adds to that suicide risk. And cell phones could get somebody to get there to get them a ride or all those things. So I just wanted to communicate that one little piece. I had to sit there for 12 hours a day with some of these kids in really stressful situations, and I was the one who had to take the things away. And it was often the parents who were like, but I told them like that would be comforting. And I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry, but we're doing these things to help you and your kids. So I just wanted to add that. And thank you guys so much for this. Because my youngest suicidal ideation at Children's Mercy was 8. And so I am so thankful that we are having these discussions in our school. So thank you guys so much for putting together these presentations.
Absolutely. And
thanks for sharing your expertise too.
Yeah, it is so important because, you know, even down to like the kids wear scrubs, and I like to prep kids I've worked with. I'd like to prep them where it's like, you are going to a hospital. There are going to be children there at various levels of illness. And so, you know, you might see things that you haven't seen before. And I think that that's also just good for kids to learn, is that, you know, kind of prepping them, they're going into a hospital setting, and it's not the same as the regular world. Yeah.
Anybody else have questions or something they want to share?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a now 11-year-old, and when super frustrated or disappointed, it is not uncommon. Like I would say, we've probably heard this 3 times in the last year which to me is too many times, that he might say, "I just wish I were dead." And as a parent, terrifies me. But I don't know how, is that really an early sign of risk? Is that just, I need some extra attention? Like, how do you know what those words mean?
It's a good question. There is no one right answer. I'd say that. And first of all, what I sense you are feeling is concern for your child's ability to process feelings and thoughts in addition to the actual words being used.
Yeah, probably true.
Yeah, because that's what's being communicated at the end of the day, right? I think that again, I'm going back to that term intention.
Exactly, yeah.
What the intention is a separate issue. And what I mean by that is the need for kids to develop skills to manage their feelings and thoughts is there even if your child never becomes actively suicidal, right? They may just be communicating how extreme their pain is and their feelings are without ever going into having intention. So that's where it's just like we've been talking about. It's so important to just begin that open dialogue about, like, when you say that, what do you mean by that? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Do you think about where that comes from? Is that you must be in so much pain? You know what I mean? Just trying to understand, like, where those phrases are coming from, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and in that, and in that situation, it never hurts to, call your counselor at school or start the process of seeking outside help. If you don't feel confident after that conversation that, your kiddo just doesn't know what else to say, because it could be he just doesn't know what else to say. He doesn't know how to explain and identify his feelings. But if you're not sure, you seek some outside help, and at the very least, that kiddo will get some coping skills and some ability to describe what he's going through.
Yeah, if you guys have any recommendations for anyone, that would be lovely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Something that I'll just add off of what Liz was saying, it made me think of this. Liz, you mentioned that prefrontal cortex development in children. Something to keep in mind, everyone, is that when a child says, "I wish I were dead," I am not trying to say that it doesn't have any risk. Okay. But what I am going to say is children's brains are so concrete as they're, at the younger ages, and even as they're developing. Concrete, I mean, like, they might only know how to say, "I'm in so much tons of pain," by saying, "I wish I were dead." They might not know other ways to communicate it. And so that's what, that's why we've been mentioning, like, kind of just the importance of opening up dialogue, because kids sometimes just don't know how else to describe their pain.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you guys. Are there any other questions or thoughts? You have our email addresses on this slide. Thank you so much for spending some of your evening with us talking about something.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Does it ever leave you when you have those kind of suicidal thoughts? Does it ever stop?
Great question. Do you want to answer that, Liz? And I'm happy to say something.
I think it varies person by person, but it can be like a reoccurring theme in your thinking that can last, for many years, I think.
Yeah. I guess my answer is, like, sometimes yes and sometimes no. It's quite often that the answer is yes. There is a great organization called NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, and they have some really cool things on the internet about survivors of mental illness and survivors of mental health struggles, where there are so many people out there who are able to get themselves to a place of wellness where they no longer have those thoughts. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not dealing with any struggles, but they get themselves to a certain place of of health in that way. And then there are people where it can come and go throughout life. And so it just depends.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions, everyone. Hey, please feel free to reach out to us. We're really glad you came. All right. I guess I will say. Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. I just have a quick question. I am sorry that I was late to the meeting. Is the link posted in the chat? Is that where we can watch the recorded or see and listen to whatever the recorded meeting?
That's the slides. How can we share the recording, do you think, Adam? Can we put it on the website maybe?
One way we can do it is we can actually, yes, so we can put it on the social work website. That's a good idea.
And then I can email the link to everyone that was invited to this meeting.
And then I will also add this, you may be able to see it this way in your calendar invitation. There should be a way to add the video recording just to the actual calendar invitation. So I'll see if we can make that work. You may just want to check the calendar invitation again later this evening or tomorrow morning, and it could just be right there. That's often the way it can work. So
thank you.
Well, we will say au revoir then, and bonsoir. Have a good evening, everyone. Only French phrases.
Have a happy, triumphant Tuesday evening.
Oh,
right.
Thank
you.
Do you want to stop recording, Katie?
Yeah, I was going to stop it.